Hello and welcome. My name is Lindsay Early. I've been with Onshape for only a short time, but I've been in the CAD industry for over 10 years. Today, we're going to talk about making the switch from SOLIDWORKS to Onshape. Specifically, we're going to talk about migration and what that may look like for your company. The agenda today is first, we're going to talk about your legacy data and what can come in to Onshape. And then as a part of that, we're going to talk about direct model editing. Because your parts and assemblies will not have feature lists, you need to use direct model editing for your adjustments that you need to make to models for the future. And then after that, we're going to talk about the actual process of exporting out of SOLIDWORKS and importing into Onshape. And finally, we're going to talk about a bulk migration option that we have in the App Store. So let's get started. So first, what can Onshape import from SOLIDWORKS? This is going to look a lot like any other CAD migration. So coming from any other system to another system. You're going to be able to bring in the parts and assemblies, but they are not going to have their features, mates, or configurations. So they'll come in as an imported solid. Drawings cannot come in their native format, but you can bring them in as a DWG, DXF, or PDF. So it would be more of a reference. If you plan on making changes to drawings in the future, you should use that reference to create an Onshape drawing so that you have something editable. But they would just be reference drawings if you brought them in. So the big thing here is that you don't get that feature list and you'll get an imported solid. So to go along with that, we need to talk about what should you migrate. And as a part of this, we'll also get into direct model editing. So what we recommend and what a lot of people choose to do is that you start all your new projects inside of Onshape. And you only transfer what you need when you need it. So what does that mean? That means things that you, from your legacy, that you want to use in your new projects that you're starting to build inside of Onshape. So this could be things like purchase components, library components, and things like that. And then keep your archive data in SOLIDWORKS. SOLIDWORKS licenses, for the most part, are going to be perpetual. So you should be able to keep the version that you had last paid subscription for on a machine, and then you could archive your data there. You can also upload your data or sync your data with the cloud using Dropbox, OneDrive, or Google Drive, which we can integrate with, which makes it a lot easier to migrate as needed. So to help you decide what things truly should come into Onshape and how you want them to come in, whether they should come in as an import or whether you're going to want to remodel them, direct model editing is a topic that we need to discuss. So there are 4 tools, features inside of Onshape that are specific to direct model editing. So editing your models that don't have a feature list. The first one is Move Face, and this is probably the one that you'll use the most when you're editing an imported solid. There are, within it, there's options to rotate, which I'm showing here on this slide, translate, and offset. The next one is Replace Face. This allows you to replace a face with another face or surface. And then Delete Face enables you to get rid of things that you don't want. And then Modify Fillet can change the size or completely eliminate a fillet. You can also use any other of the regular features and affect the imported solid. You can use planar faces as sketch reference planes, and you can convert the surfaces or edges to sketch entities so that you can use them for additional features. So you still have those available to you as well. I have a few examples that I want to show you, but before I do that, let's talk about create selection because we're going to use it quite a bit when I show you the direct model editing. So I have 2 examples here. Create selection is available in most of the direct model editing tools or features, but even in features where it isn't shown, you can actually just bring it up by right-clicking on weight space and going to create selection. So this tool is available for any feature that you want, but it's especially useful for direct editing. So I have the example of the rotating the flange on the left, and it's selecting all of the faces of the flange because we need to get all of those faces of the flange selected. And there's 38 of them. So it could be very time consuming to select each one of them. And then on the right, I have an example of selecting a pattern of holes. So let me switch over to my Onshape, and we'll take a look at what this kind of, how this can come together. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the rotate option. So we're going to rotate this flange here 45 degrees. So I'll start by starting the move face command. And the faces to move to the right of it is the create selection tool. If I select that, there are faces and edges. So we're not going to focus in the edges portion of this. For this presentation, we're going to focus on faces because that's usually what you're going to want to select when you're doing direct model editing. Under faces, you have different rules of which it will follow to select the other faces. So protrusion is anything sticking out. Pocket is the opposite of that. And then we have just holes, so standard holes, fillets, tangent connected faces, or bounded faces. So in this case, the flange is a protrusion. So I'll keep it at the protrusion option. And then for my selection, I can just select any of the faces on the flange. So if I select that, you can see that it automatically selects all 38 faces. So I only selected one face and I got them all. If I add the selection, it goes over to the other tool. So I'm ready to just close this one down. Inside of Move Face, I have the option to do Offset, Translate, and Rotate. We're going to do all of these options, but for this one, we're going to do Rotate. You just need to select an axis, so I'll select the cylindrical face to define my axis, and then I need to set the rotation angle. And then if I accept it, I've moved that flange, and I didn't even have to have the feature tree to be able to do that, or feature list. So the next thing I want to show you is the boss here. I'm going to translate that up towards the front flange. So I'll bring the move face command up again. And on faces to move, I can create a selection again. So we're going to keep it on the same option, and I'll just select one of the faces of the protrusion. So here, it didn't actually select this hole because that's a hole. We had a change of direction here, which prevented it from selecting that hole. I don't want to select it while I have the create selection tool on, otherwise it's going to try and select another protrusion. So I'll just add the selection and we'll add it over here. So just to make it easier to see, because it tried to go ahead and do an offset for me, I'm going to set it to the translate and remove the direction so it's not trying to show me a preview. Now, if I go back to the selection box, I can just select the whole. And now I have all the faces that I need. So when you're doing a translate, you need to pick a direction. So that could be a linear edge that you wish to follow, or it could be perpendicular to a face. So I'll choose this front face, so it'll go perpendicular to it. And I'll just set it to a blind distance of 0.3 or 0.75, so 3/4 of an inch. Accept that, and it moves the entire boss. So the last option that I want to show you in Move Face is Offset. And you can use this for all kinds of things, but in this case, I'm going to use it to resize these holes. So I'll choose the Move Face command. And again, we're going to create a selection. In this case, it's not that many faces, but if you had a whole plate full of holes, it could be a big time saver. So I'll choose the whole option this time. And for my selection, I'll select one of the faces of the hole. And it selects the fillet at the top of it as well. So it's smart enough to do that. But you'll notice that it didn't actually select any of the other holes. That's where select patterns comes in. If I select that, then it will pick all of the holes that are identical. Add that selection over here, close it down, and I can set my offset, and we'll do 0.03. And you can reverse if you wanted to make it bigger, you could, but I want to make mine smaller. Accept that and done. So those are all the options in Move Face. If you only take the time to learn one of these tools today, this one's going to be your best bet. It's going to give you the most versatility on different things that you can do with your imported solids. But I'm going to take some time and show you some of the other ones. So the next one I want to show you is Delete Face. That's good for if you want to get rid of geometry. So the Delete Face is right here. And I can, again, use a create selection if I would like. And I'm going to use hole. I want to get rid of the 4 holes that are on this face. I'm not going to use select patterns this time because there are many identical holes of the same size. So I won't do the patterns this time, but I'll select a face for each one of them. And add the selection. So over here in the delete face command, I have the ability to heal, cap, or leave open. If you choose leave open, it's going to turn this part into a surface model, which means that it is no longer solid. So you would have to fill it in with the surfacing tools to be able to make it a solid again. Heal and cap in this case are going to have an identical result because the face is flat that they're on. But let's say if you had a hole over here where there's 2 angled faces, the heel would extend the faces so you get that corner here, whereas the cap would have just capped it off and there would have been a flat portion here. So a little hard to visualize because I don't actually have a hole there, but just trying to give you an idea. So in this case, I'll just use heel. It has the same result as cap in this situation. Accept that, and those holes are gone. So I could then come in with another hole feature if I wanted to. So that one's pretty straightforward. The next one I want to show you is the replace face. Replace face allows you to essentially extend up a face until it hits another face or surface. So replace face is right next to move face. And you just select the faces that you want to replace. Let's say I want to get rid of this shelf here. Select that face, and I want to replace it with this outer face. Simple as that. So this one is a very, very simple example, and extrude probably could have achieved the same results. But there are more complex situations with more complex surfaces where that would be the only tool to use. You can use it in regular modeling as well. This is one that I would say has a wide use in just all kinds of CAD modeling. All of these have their place, but some of them are more oriented towards imported solids. So the last one that I want to show you is the modify fillets. That command is over here to the left, and I can choose my faces to modify. So this one doesn't actually have the create selection tool in it. So I can just right click in white space and I can choose create selection. So in this case, I'm going to choose the fillet option. And when you do that, you can do equal radius, equal or smaller, or equal or greater. So I just want all the ones that are equal, and I will pick one of these fillets here. Add the selection and close down that tool. So then over here, I can choose to change the radius, or I could even remove the fillet completely if I would like. So we'll change the radius, and I'll set it to 1/4 inch. Accept that, and it's done. So those are the direct editing tools that you have. So knowing that, you should be able to devise a plan on whether it's more beneficial to you to remodel the things that you want to import, or whether direct model editing would give you the ability to make the small changes that you may need to make for the future. So let's head back to the presentation. Okay. So now that we understand what we recommend as far as importing and You know what tools you have available to you with the imported solids. Let's get in to what it looks like to export out of SOLIDWORKS and import into Onshape. So when you are exporting a SOLIDWORKS assembly, you need to have a zip file that has the name of the top level assembly. And inside of it, you're going to have the top level assembly, all the sub-assemblies, and all the parts as one flat folder. You can make this manually if you don't have SOLIDWORKS available to you. But the easiest way to get the zip file created is using a pack and go in SOLIDWORKS. And here I've highlighted 3 important settings for when you're doing a pack and go. One is to include your toolbox components because it will leave those out by default. And if you want the hardware to be represented on the imported assembly, then you're going to want to include them. And then obviously you want to create a zip file because it must be in a zip format. And then you want to flatten it to a single folder because if there are subfolders inside of the zip file, it will fail to import. Apart from that, it's pretty straightforward. So you just get that zip file and you are good to go to import inside of Onshape. So when you're in Onshape and you go to import, there are 3 options, and I will show you the results of all 3 options with the same assembly so you can gauge what each one truly does. But let's talk through it first. So I've organized them from least control over to most control, and it's also least complex to most complex is really a good way to think of it. The combining to a single part studio is good for something that is a small assembly, perhaps it's purchased, something that you don't really care that has an accurate bill of materials. And the reason I say that is because if you import it all into a single part studio, if you then make an assembly of it, any kind of instances are going to have their own row in the bill of material. So you don't want to use the single part studio if you want to make sure that instances are represented as a single line item versus several separate line items. So if you want to treat it as a part, use the single part studio. That's what I usually recommend. The next step up is importing to a single document. So this is kind of a small baby step forward. That one still has a single part studio, but it has separate tabs for each assembly. This is still not a good option for very large assemblies because you still have the single part studio. But you do have the separate assemblies so that you can make drawings of a subassembly and a higher level assembly. So you have that separation and you will get an accurate bill of materials with this one. And then the last option is to split into multiple documents. So this is probably going to be similar to what you're more used to now. You have a single part file inside of SOLIDWORKS that has a single part in it. You have a single assembly file that has an assembly in it. In Onshape, we have documents that you can have multiple tabs in. But when you choose split into multiple documents, it's going to create a single document for each one of those files. So a part is going to have its own document, an assembly is going to have its own document. This gives you the most control. But I do recommend that if you use this method, that you go ahead and try to combine documents where it makes sense, like put all the parts for the subassembly in this subassembly document. And I'll show you what I mean by that shortly. So let's give it a try. So I'm back over in my Onshape, and I'll go into the root of my Onshape. So to import, I'll just use the create button and I can choose import files, or if you have integration set up, you can choose your integration there as well. So that's why using Dropbox, OneDrive, or Google Drive could be very beneficial. Also, if you had them in your integration, you can navigate to it and then just right click on the document that you wanted. I think I put it here. So you could just right click on the document that you wanted to import and import to Onshape. So very versatile if you do have things already in an integration. In this case, I'm just going to use the import files option and navigate to my zip file. So I've already created this in SOLIDWORKS and I'm ready to import. So if I go to open this, we're going to start with the simplest option. So that is the single part studio. Also, if you are importing from SOLIDWORKS, SOLIDWORKS has the y-axis up. Onshape has the Z axis up. So if you don't select this option, the orientation for your front, right, ISO, all those views will be different and not what you intend. So when you're importing SOLIDWORKS, use the Y-axis up option. Also, you can choose to create a composite part of your part studio. If you choose that, it will turn it into a single part. So it's good for something maybe that you purchased. But you can also do this after the fact with a feature for composite part, which I recommend or I prefer, because if you select it on import, you can't go back. But if you do it as a feature, it is changeable. So I'll say okay to this. And it's going to upload and convert it. And once it's ready, I will see a link here on the notification. So right now it is creating a document and it is converting it. So if I click here, it's going to bring up my import. So you can see I have a single part studio, but also because it's a part studio, nothing has movement. I would have to use the transform command to be able to move anything around here. So I'd have to put it in an assembly. But I also have a lot of repeated components. So each one of those would show as its own line item in the assembly if I were to put it in there. Also, you'll notice on an import that you're going to have a CAD imports folder. In there is going to be the zip file that we use to create these documents. You don't want to delete this. If you delete it, the Part Studio is going to empty because it's a direct link. The cool thing about this is I can actually right-click on it and choose Update and navigate to another file if there was an updated file set. So if you're working with somebody, maybe you're working with someone external that uses SOLIDWORKS and they're sending you updated models, you can just right-click and choose Update to get the updated information. And Onshape should try to maintain the references that you have in other assemblies or drawings and things like that. So that is the basic import using the single part studio. I've already imported it 2 other times for the other ones, so you don't have to watch the whole import process again. So let me go over to where those are and we'll walk through them. So let's look at the next step up. That was the one where you have a single document. If I choose hydraulic assembly.zip, this one has a part studio, and you'll notice the parts seem to be missing, but if I look inside, they're actually all centered about the origin. So when you choose this option, Onshape will put the parts origin on the origin of your Onshape part studio. So if it's modeled in SolidWorks, they're all going to be centered about the origin and perhaps overlap. But you can just show or hide things to be able to work on individual items if you need to. And then you have the subassembly tabs that have all the subassembly information, and then you have your higher level assembly. So very similar, but you have that extra control with the assemblies. And your bill of materials will be correct. So then now let's talk about the most complicated, or not complicated, but the one that gives you the most control is the importing into separate documents. When you do that, Onshape will automatically create a folder named after the zip file. So hydraulic assembly zip. When you go in there, you notice each one has its own document. So each unique part and subassembly will have its own document. If I go into the top level assembly, everything will show as linked at a version because they are linked documents, which you have to have a version for. And then I can just go ahead and make my assembly and move forward with it. I do recommend that if you do this method, that you should go ahead and try to combine the documents that make sense. So like put the hoist ring inside of the hoist ring assembly document. Let me walk you through that real quick and what that may look like. So if I go into here, I have and sorry, I imported this previously, so I already had created something that I'm going to tell you to create. So I have the hoist ring top here, and then I have the CAD import. And when it's the individual parts, you'll just get a parasolid link to it. And I want to move this to the higher level assembly. So what I can do is insert a new element. And the reason I'm doing this is because you can't leave a document empty. So if you're going to move something out, there has to be something there. So I'll just create an empty part studio. And then I can right click on it and move to document. And then I can just navigate to the document that we were just in. And it's going to move the hoist ring imported part as well. Move. And it's gone from this document now. And then you could just delete this document if you're done with it. And if I go back to, and I think I put it in the higher level assembly, but that's okay. So let's go into the top assembly. Oh, yeah, that one. And you'll see that I get the part in there. And you'll also get a separate CAD imports folder. You can just right click, unpack it, and then drag and drop it over into the other one to clean things up. But that's how you can combine them if you want to. Some choose to keep it completely separate, and that's fine as well. Onshape's very versatile, so you can choose what works best for you. So let's get back to the presentation. Okay. So post import, you will want to, if there are repairs, you could do them. There shouldn't be too many between SOLIDWORKS and Onshape because they are both built on the Parasolid kernel. So you shouldn't see that too much, but if there are any modifications that you need to make, now's the time to do it. You should also complete the metadata because that does not come over as well because it's just a solid that's coming in. You want to add your mates to your assembly, and then also you can, if you did the one where it's doing multiple tabs for assemblies and it's already in one big document, you could move sub-assemblies out into their own document if you wanted, or you can combine documents just like I talked about. So that brings us to, what if you have a lot or very large assembly to bring in, or you have a lot of assemblies that you've decided you really need to bring them in? Well, you should look into Cassini then. Cassini is in our app store. And what they do is bulk migration. That's what they do. So you can take your SOLIDWORKS files and you can bring them up with a bunch of them at once. Some benefits of it, if you have a part that's used between several assemblies, it will import that part only once and the assemblies will reference it. Also, they can bring in custom properties. So that's another big benefit. So if you have a lot of data that you need to bring in, Cassini might be something that you want to look into. You can go to their website, cassiniplm.com, or you can also access them in the App Store, or you can talk to tech services or customer success, and we will all point you in the right direction. So that brings me to questions. So let me, so someone asked, what do you mean integrating with Dropbox? So what I mean is, if you have something integrated in Onshape, it's actually a setting. You can set it up under your account, integrations. So these are the 3 integrations that we provide or provide a connection to. And if you have them up in Dropbox, Google Drive, or OneDrive, you can actually access it through here. So like how I showed you that I had the hydraulic assembly here, you can actually just import it straight from here. Or when you're doing create, you can choose import from and choose it there. So if you have that kind of integration, then importing ad hoc, like whenever you need it, is a lot easier. Someone asked, how can I work on tessellated geometry in Onshape? Will the direct editing tools work to modify these? So I don't have a ton of experience with tessellated data, but I do know that we have a couple tools intended for those. As far as the direct editing tools, you can use them to delete, because tessellated data is going to come in as a bunch of triangles. You can use them to delete damaged triangles, and then you can use your surfacing tools to smooth over certain sections. So yes, you can use them on surfaces brought in by tessellated data. Any option to import PCB? So So we would bring in just solid mechanical geometry. As far as getting into ECAD, that's something that we're working on with one of our acquisitions that they talked about at the beginning of the uh, the prime keynote session. So I would wait to see what comes up with that. What other types of files can you import into Onshape? So you can bring in your SolidWorks files, Unigraphics, Creo, so those standard big name CAD types. You can also bring in non-CAD data, so you can bring in images and things like that. If you look in the help, there is a whole list of things that you can bring in. So someone asked, what do you recommend for updates to SolidWorks drawings, but no change to the 3D model? So you can't bring in the SolidWorks drawings natively, but you can bring them in as a DWG, DXF, or PDF. And then if you have an update to it, you can right click, as I showed in the import demo, you can right click on it and choose update and navigate to the updated file to update it. Okay, so someone asked, what's the benefit of using Cassini over just doing the importing like what I showed you? So the big ones are that you can get your custom properties automatically brought in, and you can also import assemblies that have a lot of shared components, and the shared components are only going to be brought in once. With the method that I showed you, it's going to bring in that component every time you bring in a pack and go. So then you would have to, if you wanted to clean it up, you would have to change the reference manually. So Cassini would do that automatically. Question, can I connect Onshape to my current PDM system, which is currently connected to SolidWorks? No, but that is something that I believe Cassini can help with as well. So if you want to import things from PDM, from SolidWorks PDM, I believe Cassini can help with that, but I would I would have you reach out to Cassini to discuss. Someone was asking, are there any tools to edit DXFs or DWGs? There is in the App Store. You get a read-only version of it when you're in a document, which I don't have an example of a DWG or DXF, but I think it's called Aries Kudo, I want to say. If I look at, yeah, Aries Kudo for Onshape. So when you view a DWG DXF, it's actually using Aries Kudo, but it's just a read-only version. So if you want to be able to edit them, you can actually purchase this in the App Store. So someone asked, do you have any best practices to get assemblies into working shape once we start our migration? So if there shouldn't be any movement in the assembly, the easiest way to get going is just go ahead and highlight the whole thing and use a group mate. And the way that works is it just basically locks all the parts with respect to each other. So then that means when you put it in a higher level assembly, they're not going to move all around on you, because Onshape, all assemblies are considered flexible. So if there's no movement, I would just do a group and call it a day. If there is some movement, then you'll have to get into using the mates. Let's see. How does Onshape deal with standard content? How can we manage our standard content libraries? So Onshape has their own standard content library that you can use. But you do not have a lot of ability to customize it. You can put your own part numbers and your own descriptions in it. Uh, there is an improvement request in to make that more customizable for people. But right now, you're restricted to just what we provide you. But if you have your own library, that's fine. I would just make a folder and you put each differentiated part in its own document. And the reason I say own document is because if you have several parts all in the same document and they're all linked to all kinds of other assemblies, then that's just more assemblies that you need to update needlessly if some part in some tab got updated. So it's better to keep them separate so that those links only get updated when they need to. But I usually just create a folder and share that with the whole company and then put each of those documents in there and you can use them as just regular parts. So purchase parts that we consistently integrate into our assemblies. Would we have to re-import all of these or do you have any digital part suppliers? So yeah, you'd have to import them. I don't know of anything in the App Store that would automatically import straight to Onshape, but you can just download a Parasolid. Parasolid is the best because that's the kernel that we're built on. So if you use a Parasolid, you should bring it in. So SolidWorks is also built on Parasolid. SolidWorks files work great as well. Okay, it looks like we don't have any more questions. So thank you everyone for your time.